My name is Amanda. I'm from Findlay, Ohio, and I have 4.5 years in recovery.
Amanda, thank you so much for taking the time to come out and speak with us today here at Focus in Findlay, Ohio. It's an RCO that you're a part of, and we're really grateful that you could host us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Sure, no problem. So let's start at the beginning. Can you share a little bit about your childhood, your family life, any trauma that you experienced, anything like that?
Yeah, so my family life was great. My home life was great. I had a dad and a mom who were very present in my life. Unfortunately, I did go through some sexual abuse with my step great grandfather, and that was quite hard to live with it. I lived with it for about 10 years before I finally got to put him in prison. Um,
What was that like, being able to actually like stand up for yourself and say no, this isn't okay?
it was actually like super empowering to go through that. The whole process, it was nerve wracking to say the least because I was doing something. I mean, 12 years ago, sexual assault wasn't really uh, heard of. So I went to counseling, and my parents had noticed that my grades were dropping, and they were like, why is this happening? But I was staying at my grandparents' house while my parents worked, and it was happening while I was there. So when I went to counseling, my counselor was like, tell me about your home life. So I told her about it, and she was like, well, that's not supposed to happen. Like, can we tell your parents about this? I was like, well, I mean, I guess, but what if they don't believe me? And so we ended up telling my parents. They very obviously believed me, and we ended up calling the cops, and we had to go through that whole process of telling the cops. And when it came time to court, um, my I had to retell my story. I had to relive all of that again, and then they had to go through the whole process. And he ended up getting booked for, I think, only 5 years, and then we had a restraining order for another 5 years, I think, after he got out. And looking back now, I felt like I was really failed in that whole situation.
Amanda, tell me what your first use was like and what did it do for you?
My first use, I was 8, and it was cool for me. It was nice to have no care in the world when I came to drinking alcohol.
Can you share a funny or tragic story that highlights your use?
One of the more tragic stories is, by the time I was 24, I had 2 DUIs under my belt.
You're a member of the LGBTQ.
Yes.
Um, what was it like, when you came out, and how did your use fit into that?
When I came out to my family first, and my mom, she already knew, but my dad was like, "You need to tell your grandparents." I was 18, and so it was pretty late in life to come out. My dad was like, "You need to tell your grandparents," and my grandparents are like, "What are people going to think of you?" Well, my grandma did, and my grandpa looked at her and said, "Who cares what other people think of her? She is what she is." And that was one of the most supportive. I mean, other than my mom, she was very supportive. And when I came out, it made it harder for me to live with that, knowing that, like, my family, some of them weren't on my side. So it led me to drink just that little bit more because I could forget that people didn't want that.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about a story that highlights your use. So let's say in the deeps of it, right? What was it like?
In the deeps of it, oh man, it was hard. I was drinking every single day. Um, I would come home from work. I worked third shift, and I would have mini parties in my garage. And once I started drinking more, I was like, I'm invincible. So it made me start drinking or driving more. And once I realized that I wasn't getting pulled over, that I was even more invincible until I did. And once I got my first DUI, everybody thought that I was going to stop drinking, and I thought that I was going to stop drinking. And then it was easiest for me to keep drinking, and I just handed over my keys to other people. And then once I realized that I felt invincible again, I took those keys back and I got my second DUI. And I realized that something needed to change. And once I realized that I needed that change, I had jail time hanging over my head. And I went through the scram unit. I went through a breathalyzer on my car, 10 days in jail. I went through the whole 9 yards. Money out of my pocket, lawyer fees, court fees, and I needed to get sober for me. And I did.
Can you share a story of how addiction impacted your family, friends, or employment?
My family didn't like that I drank, even though my dad was an alcoholic as well. My family thought that mine was worse than his because I was doing it at parties and I was doing it with other people, whereas he was just doing it at home. So my family would tell me, even my dad would tell me that I needed to stop drinking. And I kept going because if he can still do it, why couldn't I?
How was your mental, physical, and spiritual health affected during your use?
My mental health was very declined. Much like most people, I thought that my mental health was just because of my drinking until I stopped drinking and realized that my mental health was always going to be there. My spiritual, I felt like I was failed by God because everybody else can just quit on the dime of things and I couldn't.
So at what point did you recognize I might have a problem?
After my second DUI, I realized that I had a major problem. And I realized that I might be an addict and with very big addict behavior.
So what happened that you decided to get help?
My DUIs. The whole court system.
So what were some barriers that were stopping you from getting help?
Definitely myself. I felt like if I quit drinking, I would lose all of my friends. I would lose all of my fun. I felt like I was just gonna lose it all if I didn't, or if I quit drinking.
Yeah. What kind of support helped you in your early recovery?
I'd say my wife now. They were very helpful to me and guided me through every step of the way. If there was ever a time where I felt like I was going to slip up, they were right there by my side, and we kept myself out of those situations where I would become prone to drinking, and essentially I did end up pulling myself away from my friends.
How has your employment journey changed in your recovery?
So I went from working into a factory to now being a peer support.
What is peer support?
Peer support is meeting people where they're at and helping people, aid them into resources. I myself am a person with lived experience.
What does your recovery look like today?
I think I base my recovery around helping others. I'd say. I find that really joyful and empowering again to be able to help others. And it helps me at the same time knowing that I'm helping.
What were some stigmas that you had in your own head about recovery that you've been able to break down today?
I thought that recovery was trash, and I thought that it was for quitters. I also thought AA was for quitters because I grew up in a small town where drinking was normal. It was normalized. And I mean, even now it's still normalized. And people don't realize that recovery is all around us. They just think that people quit because they had to.
Right.
Whereas people quit because they want to.
Absolutely. So what do you do today to maintain your mental, physical, and spiritual health?
Today I come to work. I wake up every day with my wife and my dogs, and I take time to play with them and just relax and be myself.
Love that. How has recovery helped you to heal the relationships that you had that were damaged by your active addiction?
It helped me to, I'd say it helped me to bridge that gap and kind of go back and apologize to the ones that I felt like I wronged. And like now I'm friends with the people that I wronged during that time because they realized that it wasn't me then. And now I can be my authentic self.
Absolutely. As a member of a minority population with your ethnicity on top of being LGBTQ, what are some things that you do today to break down those barriers for marginalized populations?
Ooh. I go out there and I be myself. I be as authentic as I can be, and I treat people with the respect that I wish I would have gotten.
Share a little bit about what your podcast is and what you guys try to do on there.
So the I Am Somebody podcast is all about breaking the stigma. It's about letting people come on and share their lived experience and let people know that we all are somebody. Everybody has their own story. Everybody has their own pathway to breaking the stigma, to breaking their recovery. Everybody is somebody.
Yeah, I love it. I love that motto.
Thank you.
Everybody, I am somebody. What have you learned about yourself from your addiction and recovery?
I learned that I am much nicer than the person that I was in addiction.
So, in your recovery, what dreams do you have for your future?
I have dreams of moving up and in the peer recovery support world, and I have dreams of getting my name out there and being somebody.
During your use, did you experience any grief or loss or trauma that maybe you had to deal with that you used to give yourself comfort?
Yeah, I lost my mom 8 years ago in my active addiction.
What was that like for you?
It was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to go through because my mom was my absolute best friend. So waking up to that news was hard.
What happened with your mental health after you experienced that grief?
My mental health declined. I was actually with a girl at the time who I was engaged to, and because of that, she ended up leaving me because I had quote unquote changed. Like I didn't just lose my best friend.
Yeah.
And that actually led me into Orchard Hall, which is a mental health inpatient facility.
What was your experience there?
It was only a 72-hour hold, so it It was more over the weekend than anything, so I wouldn't say that it was a great experience.
Okay.
So.
What are some internal and external motivators that keep you in recovery today?
Some internal ones are knowing that if I fail, I lose everything. Some external, also, if I fail, I lose everything.
Yeah.
I mean, being a peer recovery supporter, if I fail, I lose my job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Recovery is not linear. Everybody has their own path, everybody has their own story, and at the end of the day, you are somebody.
Amanda, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come join us and share some inspiration and hope for those who still need to hear it. Your story will help to spread awareness, humanize addiction, end stigma, and inspire hope one story at a time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
No problem. Thank you for having me on the podcast, too. That was so much fun.